I need to warn you about something before we start. What you're about to hear is not just another story, it's the kind of truth that crawls under your skin and refuses to leave. Imagine this. The person you trust the most, the one raising your child beside you, might not be who your child believes she is. Now let me ask you, if your daughter looked you dead in the eyes and said, "That's not my real mom," what would you do? Would you laugh it off as childish imagination, or would you start questioning everything you thought was safe in your home? Stay with me, because by the end of this video you'll not only get the answer to that question, but you'll see exactly how one single drawing from my daughter cracked open a truth I never thought possible. And trust me, you're not going to want to look away until you know how this ends. The story begins on what seemed like an ordinary Sunday morning, one of those quiet family days when you think nothing can go wrong. The sun was filtering through the curtains, my wife was in the kitchen making pancakes, and my 8-year-old daughter Lily was sitting at the dining table with her crayons scattered everywhere. She loved drawing more than anything. It was her escape, her language, the way she expressed things she couldn't yet put into words. I remember walking over and ruffling her hair, asking her playfully if she was making me a picture. But instead of giggling the way she normally did, she looked up at me with this serious expression that didn't belong on her face. That's when she said it. Softly at first, almost like she was afraid of the words, asterisk, "She's not my mom." Asterisk. Now let me pause here and ask you, what would you think if your child said something like that? Most parents would dismiss it, right? Kids have wild imaginations, they get confused, they say things without meaning them. But the way Lily said it, with this quiet conviction, it was different. It was chilling. It wasn't the kind of thing you could laugh off. She wasn't joking. And when I asked her what she meant, she picked up one of her crayons, pressed it hard to the paper, and started to draw. Now before I tell you what she drew, I want you to really put yourself in my shoes. Picture your child sitting there, crayons moving fast, colors blending, lines forming into something that doesn't make sense until suddenly it does. My daughter, who had been raised by my wife since birth, was sketching a face she swore belonged to her real mother, and the scariest part? The face she was drawing looked nothing like my wife. Nothing. At that moment, I felt this sinking weight in my chest. You know that feeling when your stomach drops because you realize something might not be what you thought it was? That's what hit me. But here's the thing. You guys know how the internet is full of stories about imaginary friends, past life memories, kids saying weird stuff that later turns out to be true? That thought flashed through my mind. What if Lily wasn't imagining this? What if she knew something I didn't? My wife walked over, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and asked Lily what she was working on. And that's when things got tense. Lily froze, pulled the paper close to her chest like she was protecting it, and without even looking up, she whispered, asterisk, "I'm drawing my real mom." Asterisk. I watched my wife's face drain of color in an instant. She tried to laugh it off, saying something like asterisk, "Oh sweetie, don't be silly, I'm your mom." Asterisk. But Lily didn't budge. She looked right at her and said asterisk, "No. Not you." Asterisk. Viewers, let me tell you, if you've ever had one of those moments when time seems to stop, when your ears are ringing and you don't know whether to scream or stay quiet, that was it for me. The tension in that room was so thick you could almost touch it. My wife forced a smile, but her eyes betrayed her. There was something flickering there, something she was trying hard to hide. And that's when I realized this wasn't just an innocent misunderstanding. Something deeper was going on, something that would turn our entire family upside down. Over the next few days, Lily wouldn't drop it. She kept talking about her real mom, describing details that were too specific, too vivid for a child to just make up. She described the color of her real mom's hair, the sound of her laugh, even the perfume she wore. And every time she spoke, I could see my wife growing more and more uneasy, snapping at small things, avoiding eye contact, as if Lily's words were poking at a wound she desperately wanted to keep hidden. Now here's the thing. I know you're watching this because you want answers. And I promise you're going to get them. You're going to see how a child's drawing opened a door that should have never been opened, how a family secret buried so deep clawed its way back to the surface. But you have to stay with me until the end, because if I told you right now, it wouldn't hit as hard. You need to see the pieces fall into place the same way I did, slowly, painfully, one after the other, until the whole picture is staring you in the face and you can't unsee it. I started asking questions, gently at first, because I didn't want Lily to feel pressured. But every answer she gave me only deepened the mystery. She kept insisting that she had another mom, and she even started leaving her drawings around the house, taped to the fridge, slipped under my pillow, tucked into my work bag. And every single drawing was of the same woman. A woman with long dark hair, sharp cheekbones, and a smile that was somehow both warm and unsettling. A woman my daughter swore was the one who gave birth to her. So here's the question you need to ask yourself as you're watching this. How much do you really know about the person you're raising a child with? How much do you know about their past, the parts they don't talk about, the things they'd rather keep buried? Because what I discovered next made me question not just my wife's honesty, but her very identity. When you're living inside a mystery without realizing it, the hardest part is that the pieces don't look like a puzzle until it's too late. I kept telling myself Lily was just going through a phase, that maybe she had overheard something at school or picked up an idea from one of her friends, but the more I tried to rationalize it, the less sense it made. And here's the thing, when your own child looks you straight in the eye with that kind of unshakable belief, it makes you start questioning not just what they're saying, but what you might have missed all along. That's where my head was in those days, trying to balance being a father, a husband, and now, apparently, a detective in my own home. I was asking myself questions at night that I never thought I'd ask. Had I really been blind to who my wife was before she entered our lives? Had I ignored signs that were always there? Or was my daughter somehow seeing a truth that even I couldn't? To understand how this got under my skin, you need to know a little bit about where I was in life when all of this started. On the surface, we looked like a perfectly normal suburban family. We had just moved into a quiet neighborhood outside of Denver, Colorado, the kind of place where neighbors waved when you drove by and kids rode their bikes until sunset without parents worrying too much. My job in software development gave me decent stability, and my wife, Emily, had been working part-time as a school librarian. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either. Our lives seemed steady, predictable, even boring in the way that most families secretly crave. But here's where things get strange. Sometimes the most ordinary settings hide the darkest secrets. Sometimes the neighbor mowing his lawn with a friendly smile is the one who saw too much. Sometimes the person sleeping in your bed is the one who's keeping the truth from you, and sometimes your child, the one you think you know inside and out, becomes the unwilling messenger of a past you never expected to face. Emily and I had always been good together, or at least I thought we were. We weren't one of those couples who fought constantly, but there was always this veil of mystery around her. She didn't talk much about her childhood, only giving vague answers when I asked about her parents or where she grew up. At the time, I assumed it was just because she had a rough upbringing she didn't want to relive, and I respected that. But now, looking back, I can't help but wonder if that silence was my first warning. And when Lily started drawing the face of her real mom, it was like that silence came back to haunt me. The sketch looked like someone specific, not like the messy scribbles kids usually make. It was detailed, intentional, almost practiced. And every time Emily saw one of those pictures, I caught her staring at it just a second too long before snatching it up and trying to throw it away. That was my first red flag. I started paying closer attention to the people around us, and that's where the suspicion began to spread in directions I didn't expect. There was our next-door neighbor, Karen, a sweet older woman who always seemed to know more than she let on. One day, when Lily was playing in the yard, Karen casually asked me if everything was all right at home. It seemed innocent, but when I asked why, she hesitated, then said, "Oh, nothing. It's just, sometimes kids pick up on things we don't." That line stuck with me. What did she mean by that? Did she see something? Did she hear something through the thin walls and open windows of summer evenings? It was a small comment, but it planted a seed of doubt. Then there was Emily's coworker, Mark, who had always been a little too friendly, always finding reasons to stop by after school events or drop by with books for Lily. At first, I thought he was just being polite, but when this whole real mom talk started, I began to notice how uncomfortable Emily looked whenever he was around. It was subtle, her shoulders tightening, her smile fading just a little too quickly. It made me wonder, what was their history? Did he know something about Emily's past that I didn't? Or was I just being paranoid, letting my daughter's words infect my mind? And let's not forget the school itself. Lily's teacher, Mrs. Hampton, had called us in for a parent-teacher conference a few weeks before all of this started. She mentioned that Lily had been distracted in class, drawing constantly instead of paying attention. At the time, I brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase. But now, after seeing those drawings, I couldn't help but think, was Lily trying to communicate something even back then? Was she drawing this mysterious woman at school before she ever mentioned her to us? And if so, had Mrs. Hampton seen the face on those pages and just not said anything? The more I thought about it, the more I realized how many shadows surrounded us, how many people might be connected to this in ways I didn't yet understand. Was the woman in Lily's drawing someone from Emily's past, a person she had tried to erase from our lives? Was it a stranger altogether, some kind of figure from stories Lily had overheard without us realizing? Or was it possible, though terrifying, that my daughter was remembering something she shouldn't have been able to remember, like a life before this one, or a mother she had once known but lost? I'll be honest with you, This is where my own mind started to betray me. At night, lying in bed beside my wife, I found myself staring at her silhouette in the dark, asking silent questions I couldn't voice out loud. Who exactly are you? What are you hiding from me? Why does our daughter feel so strongly that you aren't her real mother? And the more I searched for answers, the more I realized I wasn't sure I wanted them. Because what if the truth was worse than the mystery? What if finding out meant tearing apart everything we had built? But here's the catch: you can't ignore something like this forever. Once the seed of doubt is planted, it grows, it twists, it takes over your thoughts until every look, every gesture, every word feels like a clue or a lie. And that's where I was, caught between trusting the woman I loved and believing the child I would die to protect. And somewhere in that tension, in those endless nights of doubt, the real story began to unfold in ways I never could have predicted. And this, my friends, is where things start to take a darker turn, because just when I thought I was beginning to piece it together, another clue appeared, one that made me realize I wasn't just dealing with a child's imagination or a family misunderstanding. I was staring at the edges of a truth that had been buried for years, and the question wasn't whether I could handle it, it was whether I'd survive it once I uncovered it. The strange thing about searching for the truth is that the closer you get, the harder it becomes to hold on to what you think you know. For a few days after Lily's drawings started piling up, I tried to keep my investigation quiet, almost like I was sneaking around in my own home. I tucked her sketches into a drawer in my office, telling myself I'd look at them later, compare them, maybe even show them to someone who could make sense of it. But one morning when I went to pull them out, they were gone. Every single one. The drawer was empty, wiped clean as if they had never existed. At first, I thought maybe I had moved them or maybe Lily had taken them back, but the sinking feeling in my chest told me otherwise. Someone didn't want me to see them anymore. Someone wanted the evidence gone. And the only other person who knew where I had hidden them was Emily. I confronted her about it gently, not wanting to start a fight in front of Lily. I asked if she had seen the drawings, if maybe she had taken them to keep Lily from obsessing over this so-called real mom. Emily just shrugged, playing it off, saying kids go through phases and we shouldn't encourage it. But her tone was sharp, her eyes darting away too quickly, like she was shutting a door on the conversation before it could even begin. That was when I realized I wasn't just dealing with a child's imagination anymore. I was up against someone who actively didn't want me to find answers. And whether she admitted it or not, my wife was standing right in the middle of it. But it wasn't only her. The deeper I looked, the more I started to notice subtle warnings, as if the world itself was whispering at me to stop. One night, when I was putting Lily to bed, I found a crumpled piece of paper under her pillow. At first, I thought it was another drawing, but when I opened it, I froze. It wasn't a picture, it was a note. The handwriting was shaky, childlike, but the words were chilling. Asterisk, don't let her know you see me. Asterisk, my heart pounded as I read it over and over. Was Lily writing this herself? Was she pretending it came from this real mom? Or was it possible that someone else had slipped it there? When I showed the note to Emily, she brushed it off as Lily's imagination again, but there was something in her voice, something strained, like she was afraid of what might come next if we kept talking about it. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay awake replaying every moment from the past few weeks, searching for connections I might have missed. And that's when something clicked. A memory surfaced, one I hadn't thought about in years. Back when Emily and I first started dating, she had disappeared for almost 2 weeks without explanation. At the time, I didn't press her for details, thinking maybe she just needed space, but when she came back she was quieter, more guarded. She told me she had been visiting family out of state, but she never mentioned it again. I buried that memory because I wanted to trust her, but now, in light of everything happening, it didn't feel like a coincidence anymore. It felt like a missing piece of a puzzle that had been waiting all along. I considered talking to her coworker Mark, the one who always seemed to hover around her at school events. Maybe he knew something. But the idea of approaching him made me feel uneasy. Was he just a concerned colleague, or was he part of something larger? Sometimes the people who offer to help are the ones holding the sharpest knives behind their backs. The thought gnawed at me, but my desperation for answers was starting to outweigh my caution. I kept telling myself I'd watch him closely before saying anything, but deep down, I already knew I'd eventually have to confront him. As if the universe wanted to keep pushing me deeper, another strange thing happened. A call came to my phone from an unknown number late one evening. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. A low voice, distorted almost as if run through static, said just one thing before hanging up. Asterisk, stop digging or you'll regret it. Asterisk, that was it. No explanation, no identity, just those words. My hands shook as I stared at the screen afterward, the silence in the room pressing down on me like a weight. It was one thing for my daughter to draw faces or scribble notes, but this was different. This was someone out there watching, knowing that I was searching. It became harder to think straight after that. Every time I tried to make sense of it, another obstacle appeared, another piece of the puzzle vanished or got twisted. Even Lily seemed to sense it. Her behavior grew more withdrawn, her laughter quieter, as if she knew I was struggling and didn't want to make it worse. One afternoon, when I asked her again about the woman she kept drawing, she whispered something I'll never forget. Asterisk, she says you're not supposed to find her yet. Asterisk, my stomach dropped. Who was she? How was my daughter hearing these things? Was it all imagination, or was there a darker influence pressing in on her life, using her as a mouthpiece to reach me? That's when I realized this wasn't just about uncovering some hidden past, it was about survival. Secrets like these don't stay buried without reason, and the people keeping them buried will do anything to protect them. I didn't know if I was fighting my wife, some stranger out there, or my own growing paranoia, but I knew one thing for sure, I was in over my head. And the worst part was I wasn't even sure who I could trust anymore. And just when I thought I couldn't take another twist, I stumbled upon something I wasn't supposed to see, a photograph tucked inside an old book on the shelf in Emily's study. It was faded, the edges worn, but the faces were clear. Emily was there, younger, standing beside a woman I had never seen before. A woman who looked exactly like the one my daughter had been drawing for weeks. My hands trembled as I held the picture, the weight of realization pressing in, but before I could process what it meant, I heard a sound behind me. The soft creak of the door opening and my wife's voice, low and steady, asterisk, why are you holding that? Asterisk. And that's where I'll leave you for now, because what came after that question changed everything, and the truth I uncovered was far more terrifying than I ever imagined. The air in the room felt suffocating when Emily's voice broke the silence, her eyes narrowing on the photograph I held in my hand. I froze, caught between the instinct to hide it and the need to finally confront her. For a long moment, neither of us moved. I could hear my own heartbeat, heavy and uneven, as if my body already knew this was the moment when the thin veneer of normal life would shatter. Emily stepped closer, her hand outstretched, demanding the photo, but I couldn't let it go. Not now. Not after weeks of doubt and strange warnings. I told her I needed an explanation, that Lily's drawings and the missing sketches and the mysterious phone call had gone too far to ignore. But instead of giving me answers, Emily's voice turned sharp, almost panicked, telling me to stop, insisting that the more I dug, the more danger I was putting us all in. It wasn't just the words, it was the way she said them, half plea, half threat, and for the first time in our marriage I realized she wasn't just keeping secrets from me, she was protecting them with everything she had. That night I couldn't stay in the house. I told Emily I needed air and drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, my mind spinning. I didn't know who to trust anymore, but I knew I couldn't let this rest. I pulled over at a diner off the highway, the kind of place that stays open all night, where the coffee is burnt and the lights hum with a soft flicker. I sat there with my notebook, scribbling down everything I knew, the drawings, the note under Lily's pillow, the phone call, the missing evidence, and now the photograph. I was trying to connect dots that didn't want to connect when my phone buzzed with a new message. I expected another blocked number, another warning, but this time it was from someone I never thought would be involved. My younger sister, Rachel. Her text was short, almost frantic. Asterisk, did you get a letter too? Asterisk. I called her immediately, my hands shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. When she answered, her voice was trembling. She told me that earlier that evening, a plain white envelope had been slid under her apartment door. Inside was a single piece of paper with handwriting she didn't recognize. The message read, asterisk, don't trust her. She's not who she says she is. Asterisk, Rachel didn't know what it meant, but she knew it had something to do with Emily and she was scared. I sat there in that booth, staring at the rain streaking down the window, realizing this wasn't just confined to my house anymore. Whoever was behind this wanted to pull my family apart piece by piece, reaching out to anyone connected to me. The net was wider than I had imagined, and the stakes had just risen higher than I could have prepared for. I drove straight to Rachel's place, needing to see the letter with my own eyes. When she handed it to me, the words felt heavier than ink on paper. I compared the handwriting to the note I'd found under Lily's pillow, and my stomach turned. It was eerily similar, almost identical. This wasn't just Lily's imagination. This was someone systematically leaving breadcrumbs, someone who knew too much about us. But what made it worse was Rachel's confession that she'd seen Emily acting strangely the last time she visited, taking a call in hushed tones, slipping into another room and coming out with red-rimmed eyes. Rachel admitted she had brushed it off at the time, but now she wasn't so sure. Back at home, I couldn't look at Emily the same way. She carried on as if nothing had changed, preparing Lily's lunch for school, humming softly in the kitchen, but now every gesture felt rehearsed, every smile a mask. I tried to confront her again to tell her about Rachel's letter, but she cut me off sharply, saying we needed to move on and stop letting Lily's stories control us. It was the firmness in her tone that made me pause. She wasn't trying to convince me anymore, she was commanding me, almost daring me to challenge her. And that's when another thought struck me, one I hadn't considered before. Maybe Emily wasn't just hiding from the truth, maybe she was afraid of it catching up to her. The contradictions kept piling up. One afternoon, while searching through old boxes in the garage, I found an old baby blanket that didn't belong to Lily. The name embroidered on the corner wasn't hers, it was another name entirely. I won't say it here, not yet, but seeing it written in neat cursive letters sent a chill down my spine. When I asked Emily about it, she claimed it was a hand-me-down from a relative, but her explanation was rushed, her face pale. Something about the way she avoided my eyes made me certain she was lying. Why keep another child's blanket in our home? Why hold on to it after all these years unless it meant something more? And just when I thought things couldn't get more tangled, the suspicious ally I had been avoiding stepped directly into the picture. Mark, Emily's co-worker, showed up at our doorstep one evening with a book he claimed Lily had left at school. But when Lily flipped through it, it wasn't hers. Tucked inside was a folded photograph, different from the one I had found in Emily's study. This one showed the same mysterious woman, standing in a park, holding a child who looked disturbingly like Lily. My blood ran cold as I stared at it, the resemblance undeniable. I demanded to know where the picture came from, but Mark just shrugged, claiming it had been inside the book when he found it. His story was too neat, too convenient, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he was involved far more deeply than he was letting on. At this point, every thread I pulled only seemed to unravel another, and none of it made sense. Was Mark trying to warn me, or was he baiting me into chasing shadows? Was Emily the one orchestrating all of this, or was she as much a victim as I was? And what about the woman in the photographs, the face that haunted my daughter's drawings? If she was real, why was her presence being hidden so carefully? The questions swirled endlessly, each one darker than the last, but one thing was becoming clear. Someone out there wanted me to know just enough to question everything, but not enough to uncover the full truth. And now, with Rachel dragged into it, with strangers slipping photos and letters into our lives, I realized the danger wasn't just about who Lily's real mom was. The danger was that every single person around me, my wife, my sister, even my daughter's teacher or Emily's co-worker, could be a suspect. And then late one night as I was replaying the day's events in my mind, I heard Lily's small footsteps padding down the hall. She climbed into my lap, her face pale, her hands clutching a fresh sheet of paper. She didn't say a word, just handed it to me. My breath caught when I saw it. This time it wasn't a drawing of the woman. It was a drawing of me. And standing beside me, holding my hand, was the same mysterious woman with the long dark hair. My wife was nowhere in the picture. Before I could ask what it meant, Lily whispered something that froze me to my core. Asterisk, she says you belong to her too. Asterisk. And that, my friends, is where things became more dangerous than I ever imagined. Because now, it wasn't just about Lily's connection to this mysterious woman. It was about mine. The night after Lily handed me that drawing, sleep was impossible. I sat in the living room with the lights off, staring at the paper as though it might somehow reveal its secrets if I looked hard enough. The crayon lines were shaky, the kind of imperfect strokes only a child could make, yet the meaning behind them was devastatingly clear. The woman with the long dark hair was no longer just a ghost in Lily's imagination or a half-buried shadow in Emily's past. She was now standing beside me in my daughter's world, as if claiming her place in my life as well. The thought left me nauseous. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever force was working through these drawings wasn't just trying to get my attention. It was pulling me into something I wasn't prepared to face. My mind spun with fear, confusion, and the heavy weight of responsibility because it wasn't just about me anymore. If this was real, Lily was at the center of it, and every second that passed without answers felt like a second I was failing to protect her. That realization hit harder the next morning when I noticed something strange outside. As I was making coffee, I caught movement through the window just beyond our fence. At first, I thought it was one of the neighborhood kids, but the longer I watched, the clearer it became that it was a grown man standing too far back to see clearly, half hidden behind a tree. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there, but he was facing our house. I froze, gripping the edge of the counter, and for a moment I told myself I was imagining it, that my paranoia was finally getting the better of me. But when I looked again, he was still there, watching, motionless. I turned to call for Emily, but by the time she came into the room, the figure was gone. She brushed off my panic, saying it was probably just a neighbor walking his dog, but I knew what I saw. And the way my chest tightened told me this wasn't random, it was connected. Someone was watching us, and whoever it was wanted me to know it. That night, Rachel didn't answer her phone. At first, I thought maybe she was busy or asleep, but by the following afternoon, when her voicemail was still the only response, the dread in my stomach became unbearable. I drove to her apartment, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles ached. When I got there, the hallway was quiet, the kind of silence that makes you feel unwelcome. Her door was locked, but a stack of unopened mail sat on the floor just inside the threshold. I knocked until my hand hurt, but she never came to the door. And then I noticed the envelope, the one she had shown me before. The letter that had warned her not to trust Emily, it was gone. Vanished. Her entire apartment looked oddly undisturbed, but that single piece of evidence had disappeared like the drawings in my desk. It was as if someone had come in, erased the proof, and taken Rachel with them. Driving home, I couldn't quiet the storm inside me. Was Rachel in hiding because she knew too much, or had something happened to her? Was she running from the same shadow that seemed to be following me, or had that shadow already caught her? Every scenario left my chest heavy with guilt, because I had dragged her into this by confiding in her, and now she was gone. My thoughts kept circling back to Lily's whispered words, asterisk, she says you belong to her too. Asterisk, what if this wasn't about Emily's secrets at all? What if it was about me, about something in my past I didn't even remember? The paranoia seeped into everything. I found myself checking locks twice, staring at passing cars too long, scanning faces in crowds as if the mysterious woman might appear among them at any moment. The breaking point came 2 nights later when I returned home late. From searching for Rachel, I pulled into the driveway and saw something taped to our front door. My legs felt weak as I approached, the cold air biting against my skin. It was another note, but this one was different. No shaky handwriting, no cryptic message. Just 5 words scrawled in bold letters. Asterisk, she was never yours anyway. Asterisk, my pulse hammered in my ears as I ripped it down and stumbled inside, my mind reeling with the implications. Who were they talking about, Emily or Lily? Was this note meant to drive a wedge between us, or was it the final confirmation of a truth I had been too afraid to face? That night I couldn't stop pacing. Emily asked me what was wrong, but I couldn't even look at her without wondering if she had written it herself. And Lily, sweet innocent Lily, was asleep upstairs clutching her newest drawing. When I peeked into her room, I saw it lying on the floor beside her bed. This time it wasn't just me and the dark-haired woman in the picture. It was Rachel too. But instead of standing with us, Rachel was lying down, her eyes closed, her arms crossed over her chest like she was sleeping, or worse. I felt the blood drain from my face as I backed out of the room, my mind screaming that the walls were closing in, that nothing was safe anymore. And that's when I knew without a doubt that this wasn't just about secrets or hidden betrayals. Someone out there wanted me to see these things, wanted me to be afraid, wanted me to realize that I was already caught in their trap. The mystery wasn't just haunting us anymore, it was hunting us. The night I found that note on the door, I thought I had already hit the peak of my paranoia, that nothing else could shatter the fragile ground I was standing on. But I was wrong. What came next didn't just shake me, it rewrote everything I thought I knew about my life. It started with Emily, who until then had been the only constant I could cling to. She was my wife, the person I believed I could lean on even as everything else around me unraveled. But that night, while I sat on the couch with the note clenched in my hand, she walked into the room and looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not fear, not confusion, something colder. Something that made my chest tighten like a vice. She didn't ask what the note said. She didn't even look surprised to see it. She just stared at me and said, "You weren't supposed to find out this way." I couldn't process the words at first. My mind twisted them, tried to rationalize them as grief or exhaustion, but the way she said them carried a weight that felt final, rehearsed, inevitable. I asked her what she meant, my voice breaking under the strain of my own heartbeat. That's when she told me something that turned every strange moment, every warning, every disappearance into a different kind of horror. She said Rachel wasn't missing. She said Rachel had come to her. And that the woman with the dark hair, the one in Lily's drawings, the one haunting me at every turn, wasn't some ghost from the past. She was real. She was alive. And according to Emily, she was someone I had known intimately long before I ever met my wife. I felt my body go numb as Emily revealed details I couldn't possibly remember, names, places, fragments of a history I had no recollection of. She said there were years of my life, entire years, that I had buried so deeply I didn't even know they existed anymore. She said the woman in the drawings was not just a stranger haunting our family, she was the person I once loved, the person I had abandoned without explanation. And Rachel had been helping her. The letters, the drawings, even the warnings, they weren't meant to scare me. They were meant to bring me back. To remind me of what I had chosen to forget. The floor seemed to tilt under me. I thought back to every moment that felt out of place. Lily calling her the woman, the drawings appearing when no one was around, Rachel's sudden vanishing act. It all shifted in my head like puzzle pieces snapping into place. If Emily was telling the truth, then the real mystery wasn't about Emily's secrets, it was about mine. Secrets I didn't even know I was keeping. My heart raced as I realized what that meant. If I had blocked out entire years of my life, then who was I really? Who was I before Emily, before Lily, before this version of me that I thought was stable and ordinary? I wanted to scream that it was a lie, that Emily was manipulating me, but deep down, there was something terrifying in how familiar her words felt. Like a door inside me had been cracked open, and behind it was a storm waiting to come through. I asked Emily why she had stayed silent all this time, why she had built a life with me if she knew there was someone else out there who claimed me. And she looked at me with tears brimming in her eyes and said, "Because you were different with me. You didn't remember her, and I thought maybe you never would." The confession landed like a blow. My wife had known all along. She had built a marriage, a family, on top of a truth I was never given the chance to face. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind kept spinning with YouTube search buzzwords that suddenly felt like the only way to label what my life had become: gaslighting, psychological thriller, toxic secrets, dark family mystery. I thought about Rachel, about the drawings, about the woman with the dark hair who seemed to live in the shadows of my house. If what Emily said was true, then she wasn't a stranger at all. She was a part of me. And if I had loved her once, if I had built something with her before Emily, then the question that terrified me most wasn't whether she was real. It was why I had erased her in the first place. By the time morning came, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Lily's drawings weren't just visions. They weren't warnings. They were memories. Memories she shouldn't have, memories that belonged to someone else. And when I asked myself how a 6-year-old could possibly know about a life I couldn't even remember, only one horrifying possibility remained. She hadn't been drawing what was coming. She had been drawing what had already happened. Things I had lived through. Things I had forgotten. And as I stood there, staring at my daughter's latest picture, I knew the worst truth of all. The woman wasn't trying to take Lily from me. She was trying to take me back. The next days felt like I was walking across a tightrope suspended over an abyss. Every glance, every word, every silence in our house carried a different kind of weight now. Emily had dropped a truth bomb on me, but she had also refused to give me the full picture. She kept dodging when I asked her about the woman with the dark hair, when I pressed her on what she really knew about Rachel's involvement. It wasn't just the lies anymore, it was the way she chose which pieces of truth I was allowed to hold, like she was rationing out information only when it served her. I started to realize she wasn't just part of the story, she was part of the game. And that game left me cornered with choices that didn't feel like choices at all. The ultimatum came on a night when I finally broke, when I stood in the kitchen with the weight of my forgotten past clawing at my skull. Emily was sitting at the table, her arms crossed, eyes locked on me like she was done pretending we were still a normal family. That's when she said it, plain and sharp, like she had rehearsed it for weeks. "If you go looking for her, if you chase this ghost of yours, then you're choosing her over us. You're choosing to burn this family to the ground." I just stood there, my throat dry, staring at the woman I had called my wife for years. It wasn't just a warning. It was a threat wrapped in heartbreak. She was drawing a line I never thought I'd have to face. My family's safety on one side, the truth on the other. I wanted to scream at her, to remind her that she was the one who had hidden all of this from me, but instead I just stood frozen because the reality was brutal. She was right. If I dug deeper, if I opened the door to whatever I had buried, there was no way to keep life as it was. But how could I stay silent when I didn't even know who I truly was? My own daughter was sketching images of a past she couldn't have possibly lived through, and Emily was telling me to just ignore it, to keep pretending. How could I trust her when every day the woman with the dark hair felt closer, more real, like she was pressing against the walls of my memory, waiting for me to let her in? The impossible part was that Emily wasn't wrong. If I chose to keep searching, I was gambling with everything. My marriage, my daughter's sense of security, the fragile normalcy we had built. But if I didn't, if I gave in and stayed quiet, then I was agreeing to live as a ghost in my own skin, a man who didn't even own his own memories. It was the kind of choice that felt like it didn't matter which side I picked because either way I'd lose something I could never get back. The kind of psychological trap you only see in the darkest true crime documentaries or trending YouTube conspiracies where families are torn apart not by outsiders, but by secrets inside the walls. What made it worse was the silence in the house after her ultimatum. Lily stopped drawing for a few days and that should have comforted me, but instead it made me sick to my stomach because I kept wondering if Emily had gotten to her too. Was she coaching her? Was she telling her not to talk, not to draw, not to remember? Every time Lily looked at me with her wide eyes, I saw a flicker of something she wasn't saying, something she was holding back. And it killed me that I didn't know if it was because she was afraid of the woman in her drawings, or afraid of her own mother. The tension stretched until it finally snapped one night when I couldn't take the silence anymore. I told Emily I was going to find Rachel, that I couldn't keep living in the dark. The look she gave me wasn't anger. It was devastation. She whispered something that made my blood run cold. If you walk out that door to find her, don't expect me to be here when you come back. My chest tightened, my breath caught because it wasn't just a wife's empty threat. It was a mother's promise that she would take Lily with her, that she would erase me from their lives the way I had apparently once erased someone else. Standing there, I realized the depth of the trap I was in. To find the truth, I would have to risk losing everything I had left. To keep my family, I would have to live with the possibility that I was already living someone else's life, a life built on forgotten betrayals. My hands shook as I held the doorknob, caught between past and present, between a woman I couldn't remember and a family I couldn't let go of. And as much as I wanted to believe I still had control, deep down I knew the choice had already been made for me the moment Lily drew her first picture of that woman. Because she wasn't just haunting me anymore. She was demanding me back. It all came crashing down the night I followed the trail I wasn't supposed to see. A folder had been left in the glove box of my car, sealed but not locked, almost like it was daring me to open it. I knew instantly it wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me to find it. My heart pounded as I sat in the driveway, the glow of the streetlight spilling across the dashboard, and I flipped through page after page of names, photos, and notes that looked less like family secrets and more like a case file out of an FBI true crime documentary. And right there in the middle of it all was me, not the man I was now but another version, another identity. Different address, different life, different family. The kind of thing you only see in trending YouTube conspiracy videos about people living double lives. My stomach turned because suddenly the question wasn't just who I had forgotten, it was how many people had been part of keeping me in the dark. As I read further, I saw Rachel's name circled in red ink, but it wasn't just her. There were lines connecting her to Emily, to Lily, and even to a doctor I vaguely remembered visiting years ago. The pages weren't random, they were a map of my life, every thread tied together in a way that made it clear I wasn't the only one being watched, manipulated, and controlled. What I thought was a private struggle, just me trying to remember who I was really just one piece of something much bigger, something organized, calculated. And the worst part was that the more I pieced together, the more I realized Emily wasn't just hiding something, she was part of it. That night I confronted her. I slammed the folder down on the kitchen table, and for the first time, I saw fear cross her face, real fear, not the anger or frustration she usually threw at me. She tried to cover it, but her hands trembled when she touched the papers. And when I demanded to know how long she had been working against me, she didn't deny it. She just whispered, "It was supposed to keep you safe." Those words hit harder than any lie because they meant it wasn't just about betrayal, it was about control, about shaping who I was allowed to be. I wasn't a husband stumbling into forgotten memories, I was a man inside a system designed to erase, rebuild, and repurpose lives. The betrayal didn't end with her. Hours later, I called my best friend Mark, the one person I thought I could trust, the one who had always told me to be careful but never explained why. I told him what I found, my voice shaking, desperate for an ally. And that's when he went silent. Not the silence of shock, but the silence of someone caught. His voice finally came back, calm, measured, the kind of tone you only hear in interrogation rooms on crime podcasts. "You weren't supposed to know yet." My chest clenched, my grip on the phone slipping. My own friend, the man I trusted more than anyone, had been in on it too. Suddenly everything felt urgent, dangerous, like the walls were closing in. If Mark knew I had discovered the truth, then others knew too. And if Emily was scared, then maybe even she had lost control of how deep this thing went. The house no longer felt safe. Every window looked like a lens. Every car that slowed on our street felt like a threat. I could hear my pulse in my ears as I realized this wasn't just about my past anymore, it was about my survival, about whether Lily and I would live long enough to figure out the truth. The real scale of it hit me all at once. This wasn't just a hidden affair or a forgotten lover or some buried family drama. This was systemic, sprawling, the kind of machinery that people vanish into when they know too much. The kind of thing you watch in Netflix documentaries about shadow programs and government cover-ups, never thinking it could touch you. And now I was staring at it from the inside with my own family tied to the center. That's when the phone buzzed again, a message from an unknown number, and my blood ran cold. 3 words, typed clean and precise like a final warning: stop digging now. And in that moment I understood, I wasn't just remembering my past. I was running out of time. The climax didn't creep up on me, it came crashing down all at once, like a storm that had been building quietly behind the horizon, waiting for the perfect second to strike. For days I had felt the invisible noose tightening, every whisper of warning, every missing piece of evidence, every hollow look from people I once trusted building into something I could no longer ignore. But it was the message, the 3 words, stop digging now, that pushed me to finally do the one thing they didn't expect: walk straight into the center of it all. I followed the only address hidden in the back of that folder, an abandoned government building on the edge of town, one of those places you drive by at night and swear looks haunted, the kind that makes it onto urban legend videos and top 10 places you should never go lists trending on YouTube. Yet it wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by the truth. Inside, the air was damp, the electricity barely alive, buzzing in the overhead lights like they might snap off at any second. I wasn't alone. I knew it before I even saw them. The sound of footsteps echoed off the walls, deliberate, steady, too calm for a stranger. And then she stepped into the light. Emily. My wife. Not frantic, not ashamed, but cold, collected, almost as if she had been waiting for this confrontation all along. She didn't look like the woman I had built a life with. She looked like someone who had shed a mask and was finally free of pretending. She told me the one thing that shattered everything I thought I knew. My life had never been mine to begin with. Every memory, every choice, every relationship had been curated, adjusted, manipulated, not for me but for them. I wasn't a husband or father by fate. I was built into it, tested in it. The family I loved was my cage. My knees threatened to give, but I forced myself to stand. I demanded to know why erase me, why rebuild me, why trap me in a world of lies. That's when the true scale of the conspiracy came into focus. Emily wasn't the villain, not in the way I wanted her to be. She wasn't acting alone, and she wasn't entirely in control. She gestured to the shadows, and Mark stepped forward, my best friend, my so-called ally, his expression devoid of guilt, only resolve. He explained it with the precision of someone who had rehearsed it for years. I wasn't supposed to be here at all. I was part of a program, one designed to test loyalty, identity, and the limits of human trust. Every relationship I had was orchestrated, every bond manufactured. I wasn't uncovering my past. I was tearing open the walls of an experiment that had gone on far too long. The rage inside me boiled, but it wasn't just anger at them. It was fury at myself for believing, for loving, for letting my daughter call me dad, when maybe she wasn't even mine to begin with. I lunged at Mark, fists clenched, ready to rip the smug certainty from his face, but he caught me with brutal efficiency as if he had done this before. Emily's scream cracked the air, real, raw, not rehearsed, and in that scream I realized she wasn't as deep into this as she pretended. She hadn't just been my handler. Somewhere along the way she had become my wife for real, and that was her mistake. She had loved me despite everything. That was the weakness in their perfect system. The struggle turned savage. Papers flew, chairs crashed, my blood smeared across the concrete as Mark drove me into the ground, whispering that none of this mattered because I wasn't real anyway. His words cut deeper than his fists, but even as my vision blurred, I saw Emily move. She picked up the same folder that had started this entire nightmare and slammed it into him, scattering the documents across the floor. And that's when the final piece of evidence appeared, something I hadn't noticed before, something slipped between the pages like it wasn't meant to be found. A birth certificate. Lily's birth certificate. The mother's name was Emily. The father's name was mine. Not an alias. Not a false identity. Me. In that moment everything flipped. If Lily was real, if she was truly mine, then their entire system wasn't flawless. Somewhere in their twisted experiment humanity had bled through. Love had bled through. And that was something they couldn't control. Mark saw it too, his face breaking from confidence into panic, because the existence of my daughter as my daughter wasn't supposed to happen. It was the crack in their entire design. I don't remember how I got the strength, but I threw him off me, years of fury, betrayal, and desperation driving me to fight like a man who finally knew what he was protecting. Emily pulled Lily's certificate close to her chest, and for once, I knew she wasn't protecting them, she was protecting us. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, and Mark's final words before disappearing into the dark hall still haunt me. They'll burn it all before they let you walk away. As I staggered out of that building with Emily at my side and Lily's name burned into my mind, I thought I had finally broken free. But then my phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. Another message. Just one chilling line that froze me in my tracks. Lily was never supposed to exist. And with that, I realized the fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Walking out of that building into the cold air of the night felt less like an escape and more like stepping into a new kind of prison. One where every truth I had believed was shattered, every bond questioned, every face a possible mask. But as Emily and I drove away in silence, her hand gripping that birth certificate like it was the last thread keeping us tethered to something real, I realized that despite everything, the lies, the betrayals, the orchestrated nightmare, I still had something they couldn't erase. Lily was real. She was flesh and blood, her laughter, her tears, her stubbornness when she refused to eat vegetables. All of it wasn't a script, it wasn't a test, it wasn't a simulation. It was my daughter, our daughter, the one undeniable truth they hadn't been able to manipulate away. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the fight wasn't about unraveling the system or exposing the conspiracy to the world. Maybe the real war was protecting the one pure thing they never planned for. In the days that followed, I expected the world to come crashing down on us. Agents at the door, cars following us, sudden accidents that weren't really accidents. Instead, there was silence, an eerie kind that made every creak of the floorboards feel like a warning. Emily and I spoke little, not because we had nothing to say but because words felt like fragile glass, too easily broken, too dangerous if overheard. I wanted to hate her for being part of it, for lying to me, for being the face of my imprisonment, but I couldn't. Not after what she did in that building, not after the way she held on to Lily's name like it was salvation. Love, I realized, is messy. It doesn't ask permission, it doesn't follow rules, it just grows in the cracks where no one expects it to. Maybe that's why their experiment failed. Maybe that's why we were still standing. I spent hours watching Lily sleep, memorizing the rhythm of her breathing, the way her fingers curled around her blanket. Every instinct screamed that she was the key, not just to my sanity but to everything. If she wasn't supposed to exist, then she was the flaw in their design, the variable they couldn't predict. And in a system built on control, one unpredictable piece could topple everything. That thought gave me hope, but it also filled me with dread, because if they couldn't control her, they would come for her. So I made myself a promise, one deeper and more unshakable than anything I had sworn before. No matter who came, no matter what it cost, I would protect her. Not because some document told me she was mine, but because my heart already knew it. Weeks later, when the first letter arrived in the mailbox, sealed with no return address, I almost didn't open it. Fear had trained me to expect threats, but curiosity outweighed terror, and inside was not a warning, not a demand, but a photograph. It was Lily, younger than she should have been in any photo I owned, maybe 2 years old, sitting in a park I didn't recognize. She was laughing, reaching out toward someone just out of frame. Scrawled on the back in messy handwriting were 5 words. She has always been yours. That was when it hit me. Not everything was manipulation, not everyone was an enemy. Somewhere out there, maybe within the same system that tried to control us, someone wanted me to know the truth, someone wanted me to keep fighting. The photograph wasn't just proof. It was a message. And so, the resolution wasn't victory, not in the clean, triumphant sense you see in movies. It was quieter, heavier, more human. Emily and I began to rebuild, not the life they gave us but the one we chose to keep. Every day carried the weight of what we knew, but also the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we could carve something real out of the rubble of their lies. Peace came not from answers but from acceptance, from realizing that the only way to win against a system built on control was to live a life too unpredictable for them to script. Still, on nights when the wind howls against the windows and shadows stretch across the walls, I wonder if the silence is safety or surveillance, if the people who design my life are watching, waiting, planning their next move. I wonder if Lily's existence is truly the glitch that will unravel everything, or if she was the design all along, the final experiment they never told us about. And that's the thought that lingers, the one that keeps me awake long after my family has drifted into dreams, that maybe, just maybe, the real test hasn't even started yet.